It's really awesome to be here with you guys. I've not actually come to this group, although I'm part of the Facebook group, so this is really cool. I'm Jess. I'm a wife of a really long-suffering husband called Chris. I've got two lovely boys who are 18 and 21, Ben and Elliot, and I live here in South Wales with my family, my dog Marmite, and two ponies. And I have the awesome privilege of working as a resource director for a charity called Freedom in Christ, which is a real privilege. It's great to work in something that makes a big difference. I've come here to share my story in the hope that I guess some of it will help some of you guys, but I just want to be clear that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm sharing my story, and all of us are here tonight linked on this screen because we battle MCAS, but each of our stories are completely unique, and so is what works for us. So as I'm sharing, please don't think that I'm saying what's worked for me or will work for you, or that you need to do the same things or you should be doing the same things. We're all built differently. We're all built to process differently as well. But my hope is, and I really do hope, the reason I'm doing this is there might just be a little gem somewhere in there that helps you. And that's what I found with MCAS. By sharing with other people, sometimes I pick up little gems, and some of those gems really work for me too. I'm going to put out a health warning. It's been quite interesting writing this talk. I do quite a bit of talking as part of my job. But I found when I was writing this and going through it, I got quite teary because the truth is the MCAS journey is actually quite traumatic. And when I actually sat back and kind of put it down and I was like, okay, this is where I was, I found I got a little bit teary. So please, if I do get a bit choked up, I hopefully it won't happen tonight, but if I do get a bit choked up, just bear with me, I will get through it. But I'm still processing some of that stuff because emotionally it's been very difficult. And I'll share some of that in my story as well about the difficulty of processing the journey. But I guess with all stories, it's best to start in the beginning and see, you know, maybe some of this will resonate with you. But when I met with Dr. Deering, it became really clear, and I say met, I mean on the phone, as we all do, that I'd always had MCAS. Over the years, I'd always had kind of niggling allergies and weird, unexplainable health stuff going on. I had a fantastic GP years back who used to quite carefully call me a weirdo. It was a joke, you know, because I'd come in and I'd have these symptoms which he could see, like a massive swollen gland, but it just wouldn't show up on any tests or anything that he could help me with. And he used to get quite frustrated because I'd be in and out and I clearly wasn't well, but he often just couldn't offer me anything that would give me any help. And it was in my 30s that I was picking up my prescriptions in a carrier bag every month. And there's kind of there's an alarm there somewhere, something wasn't right. But the truth is, I guess, as we all do, I didn't think a lot about it. I just managed to keep going and being a mum and a wife and just kind of kept on keeping on. You know, I just kept going. Then at 36, I had a big uterine cancer scare, which really, thankfully, turned out to be nothing more than a scare, but resulted in a hysterectomy surgery. I had insanely excessive period bleeds and a really violent reaction to the coil they tried to use to resolve it, funnily enough. And I remember the surgery actually went really well. I had a fantastic guy who did the surgery, but the anaesthetic really didn't go well. And I remember coming around from the surgery and being told that I had literally scared the living daylights out of the anaesthetist, and that he was on his way home for a stiff drink now I was round, because apparently my BP had kind of crashed, but my heart rate had gone through the ceiling, and I scared everyone in the room. All I know is that from that surgery, I never felt remotely well ever again. I was plagued with fatigue and aches and pains, and I really struggled to read, which, if you've never come across brain fog before, is really scary. But, you know, I kind of just picked myself up, recovered, but I don't feel great. But I kind of just kept on keeping on, which I think is what a lot of us end up doing. It was a year later, it got really sticky when I got bitten by a tick. So I was just kind of still recovering from the surgery. And interesting enough, it wasn't the tick bite that decked me, it was the antibiotics that I was given. And I remember actually I was speaking at an engagement in the Midlands somewhere, and I was standing and I drank, I think, something like 4 litres of water. And as I finished speaking, I felt like the floor pulled me down and I nearly collapsed. My boss had to drive me home, all the way home from the Midlands. I was so poorly. And I just couldn't get back up from it. I had like the worst flu in history, visual disturbances. And at one point I had pain so bad that they sent me to A&E thinking I had DVT and heart attack. I was just in an absolute mess. and I was literally 6 months in bed. I just couldn't get up. My memory was shot, my balance was shot. And the really frightening thing is nobody could tell me what was going on. Was it post-treated Lyme's? You know, what was this? I couldn't keep on keeping on. I was absolutely decked. Eventually, my GP tried to diagnose me with ME, but I wasn't having any of it. I wanted him to check everything else. And after a raft of blood tests, he found a B12 deficiency, and I started injections. And I remember my body just reacted so violently to the injections. I had rashes and these kind of putrid spots and headaches and aches, but I just kept going with it because I was finding it was improving the cognitive and fatigue stuff. So I just kept pushing on and pushing on and pushing on. And then they went to, so initially with B12, you get injections like 6 in 2 weeks. And then it went to 3 monthly, and I just collapsed again. I did some research and found that actually in my situation, I needed injections every other day. Took that research to this lovely GP who agreed, as long as I did them myself at home, gave me everything. And there I was doing every other day injections of B12. Interestingly, the reactions petered out over time. I'm still on B12 injections 2 a week, and I don't really react to them. When I think about it, I was still really quite unwell, but because the B12 injections got me out of bed and got me walking and kind of barely functioning, I managed to get back to work. Most of my work was speaking and traveling around the UK and a little bit internationally. And I kind of got into this rhythm of getting myself together to work. I'd go and do an engagement, which would involve normally staying in someone's home because I work for a charity and we don't, want to be spending money on hotels and stuff. I'd come home absolutely wrecked, and I'd be able to do nothing for like 2 or 3 days, and then I'd sort of recover a little bit, and then I'd go back out to the next engagement. And I was in this cycle of working, ill, working, ill, working, ill. But I was still working and I was still functioning, so I managed to keep on keeping on until COVID hit. And I think probably a lot of us, this will resonate with. We here in our family were in the very first wave of COVID. I remember it had only just been announced that there was this killer pandemic and there was hysteria everywhere. And my son brought it home from school, and we were the first people I think we know that had COVID. It was very, very early on. My sons and my husband literally did the cruising it. They had a bit of a cough, a bit of a cold, a bit of a flu. I was the last. I nursed them, and then I came down with it, and I literally collapsed. On day 14, the paramedics were called, and they could see that I was really poorly. My obs were all over the place, but I could breathe and I could speak, and they were just like, look, you don't want to go to the COVID ward if you can breathe. We suggest you stay here, and one of 2 things is going to happen. You're either going to recover in the next kind of 48 hours, you're going to pick up, or you're going to be in hospital. So I was like, okay, we'll wait here and see what happens. Neither happened. Basically, neither happened. This was not what they said. Neither happened. I was 6 weeks in bed. I just couldn't do anything. And after 6 weeks, I was almost too sick to stand or walk, but I pulled myself out of bed. And then for 6 months, I had these kind of cyclical fever-like temperature changes. My stools were yellow water whenever I ate. Were we all right? I just passed water. My whole body was in pain. I kept falling over, feeling dizzy, having flushes, rashes, UTIs. I mean, it's like the MCAS. I'm not going to bore you with the symptoms, but the one that really scared me was the cognitive stuff. I mean, it was bonkers. I could not drive my car, even like start it and go, because I just couldn't multitask to drive the car. What else can I do? I couldn't read. It was absolutely crazy. Like, I literally couldn't read. I could read the words, but I couldn't then tell you what I just read. It would literally just go straight out of my head. So I couldn't even read a line and tell you what the line was when I'd finished reading it. But it really came to a head when I tried to get to our corner shop, which is like literally there, and I got lost trying to come home. And I was absolutely terrified, and I was absolutely convinced that I had some kind of dementia. I was about 6 months post-COVID now, mid-pandemic, and I contacted my GP and I said, you've actually got to see me now, because it had all been down the phone. A lot of this had been on the phone because of COVID and they weren't seeing people. And she did like neuro and memory tests, where they have you touching your nose and walking, all the rest of it, and trying to remember stuff they told you. And I basically scored like a really poor dementia patient. And when they checked my heart, I had a really weird heart rhythm, and my resting pulse, I think, was about 140. So fair play to the NHS. I was sent off for an urgent MRI, but there was no signs of dementia or brain damage. So boom, that's it. I'm still stuck. There's no way forward. Obviously, I needed to see a cardiologist, but like a lot of the country, in Wales, the NHS waiting lists are crazy. It was going to be minimum 12 months to see a cardiologist unless I actually had a heart attack. So I was kind of completely stuck. And you know, I've never been so frightened where kind of your options run out with the NHS, so that you're still really, really sick and no one can give you any answers. So there I was in chronic pain everywhere, unable to really walk. If I tried to, I got lost. So I was a bit of a liability. If I ate anything, it came out like yellow water. I was unable to work as I couldn't read emails. I couldn't read, I couldn't function. I couldn't cook because I dropped everything if I tried to cook. If I tried to chop stuff, I was a liability, like even chopping the veg. I couldn't even follow conversations with more than one person, as I just got confused and lost and couldn't work out what was going on. I couldn't drive without nearly crashing. Basically, I was unable to do anything other than have sweaty sleeps full of nightmares and sit and watch the birds in the garden, feeling ill. I was also on crutches because of a knee injury, but actually that was because I just lost all the tone in my body. It wasn't really the knee injury that was the problem. And I was just in a state of battling really bad anxiety, really bad fear and despair. And I honestly thought that I was just dying slowly. I just thought, no one understands this COVID disease. It's killing me. It's just killing me really, really slowly. It was a really, really dark place to be. And I literally found myself crying out to God to do something. I was just like, I'm just dying here, and I've got 2 boys and a husband. You know, this just can't happen. It stayed like that for a while. It was a really dark time in a really dark place. The GP couldn't do anything, couldn't offer me anything, just kept saying, I'm sure it'll get better. I'm sure it'll get better, which was, and then there was like a light bulb moment. And there was a time, I can't remember his name, but a guy was putting videos out on long COVID. He was doing his own research and pulling in experts. And there was a link between long COVID and MCAS. And it kind of pricked my ears. And I was like, I had to watch the video about 3 or 4 times to like, try and absorb enough from it. But I was like, okay, could this be this thing called MCAS that I've got? So that was the first breakthrough. But then you speak to the doctors, they've never heard of it. I don't know what you're talking about, you know, and anyway. Then I'm very fortunate to work with nurses and doctors in my job. And one of the nurses who worked voluntarily with us offered to help me with dysfunctional breathing, which is thought to happen with COVID. And so we were on Zoom together, and she was talking me through this breathing thing. And I went to stand up and nearly collapsed. And she looked at me and she said, "You've got POTS." I said, "Well, what's POTS?" She's like, "Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. You've got POTS." I'm like, "Well, what do you know about POTS?" She said, "Well, I kind of founded a charity in it," kind of thing. So she diagnosed me with POTS. So I go back to my doctor. I think I've got POTS. I don't know what to do with that. So then I was like a dog with a bone. I was like, okay, there's this thing called MCAS and there's a thing called POTS, and I might have one or the other. I was thinking at the time. Turned out I got both. You know, there's a lead, because when you don't know what's wrong, it's just despairing, isn't it? You've got nowhere to go. But when you suddenly think you've got a lead to follow, there's suddenly some hope that if you can find out what it is, you might be able to do something. So I started looking for POTS doctors. There's none I could find in Wales. And it looked as though I was definitely going to have to go privately. It's very tricky transferring between NHS Wales and NHS England, really difficult. And I found this dude called Dr. Deering. And just praise God, he did MCAS as well. Could you make it up? And at that time, I know there's a frustration that his list is closed, but this was so early on, his list was really short. So I emailed him and got his secretary, who was absolutely amazing. And my doctor immediately wrote a referral letter because she was feeling desperate for me. And I had an appointment on the phone within a week. It was just like, wow. And it was, you know, I have to say I owe him an absolute debt in this journey. He has been nothing short of phenomenal. That for me, I guess if you're going to say where was the turning point for me, was finding this right doctor who just looked at it and went, I know exactly what this is. But then came the trudge. Okay, so you've got the breakthrough. Okay, I'm not mad. This is going on. Somebody knows what's going on. But then came the trudge. I think I saw him every month for months. it was like 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and it was really short gaps. And he and my GP worked together so hard. The POTS and the MCAS were both diagnosed fairly quickly, but then working out the treatment seemed to take forever. It felt at times soul destroying. We had quite a few false starts. I remember trying one med and it just, I was so sick on it. And I'll be honest, in many respects, we're still working it out. Okay, so I think I'm 2 years in now. Do you lose track of time? I've lost track of time. I think it must be 2 years now I've been with doctor, and we're still working it out. I've just started a new drug, which has been phenomenal so far, and I'll share more about that later. But I'm sitting here on the journey, not having it necessarily all sorted, just away down the journey. But the sorting out the meds has been really frustrating, but worth doing. And the thing is, with the sorting the meds out, really that's what the doctors are up to, right? They listen to what we're struggling with, and they tweak it, and they change it, and they change doses, and they try something else and all the rest of it. But while they're doing their thing, I was still left here trying to work out how to live my life, because I had these 2 debilitating diseases. Either one of them, I'm told, by sufferers on both sides can be completely debilitating, and I had 2. I was really weak. I wasn't able to read or walk or drive. I mean, how did I live like this? How could I be a mum? How could I be a wife? Was this going to be forever? Would I ever improve? Dr. was saying, it'll get better. And I'm like, when? Despair, to be honest, I always used to say it was 3 thoughts away. If I let my head go, it was like 3 stepping stones and I would fall into a black pit of despair, and I had to use all the tools I teach, to be honest, had to use everything I got in my arsenal, and I still struggled not to just fall into despair. I guess, thankfully, because I was on crutches, I was referred to a physiotherapist because I'd really done a ligament in my knee. And I remember going to see him, and he was horrified at the state of my body. I had no tone, no muscle. I was basically like somebody that had been hospitalized for months without any physio in bed, because that's basically what happened. I just wasn't moving. And I remember telling him that I had this thing called MCAS and this thing called POTS, but that anything like exercise basically made me really sick. And it really confounded him as a physio. He was like Mr. Buff. And it completely confounded him. And he was like, do you want to get fitter? I'm like, I do want to get fitter. I used to mountain bike. I used to ride horses. Like, I want my life back. And I was crying in the appointment. I was there for a knee, but talking about my body. And he offered to help me with the knee, because that was what I'd been referred to him for, but also to help me improve my baseline from nothing, less than nothing, to whatever I could get. And I remember kind of going, this could be fun, because, I walk up the stairs and I feel ill. But he challenged me to stop saying I can't do anything, which really I couldn't, which was quite ironic, to work out what I could do and do that. And I remember saying, I can't do anything though, like I'm lying to myself if I could. He said, can you walk up 3 steps? And I'm like, oh yeah, I can do 3 steps. He said, then you can do something. So we'll start there. And so I would go up 3 steps 4 times a day, and I just use those 3 steps. And I couldn't walk down the end of the road, but I could walk to the end of our garden, which is only little. So I did that, and I did that multiple times a day. And then I found actually I could walk a bit down the track, and then I could walk to the river, and slowly, minute, tiny steps, I found that I was doing more. Then he encouraged me to try some Pilates. I'm not really an exercisey person, so it did drive me up the wall, but it helped me so much. It was funny because I was in like Pilates for beginners, and they say this is really easy, anyone can do this, and I'd be like, I can't even get my leg off the floor. Literally I was like trying to pull my leg up. But over time I started being able to do the exercises, and had great hilarity when my 18-year-old was like, that's easy, and I said try it, and he couldn't do it. I was like, yes, look at that. So but it was slow, inch. It was really, really frustrating. I can't say how slow this journey was for me. My husband, who is an absolute rock, could see that actually alongside this, I was having a serious mental health battle. I was fighting really, really hard, but I was exhausted. I was exhausted with the fight. I was really low, and I had lost sight of any joy in my life at all. Like I was just thinking, there's nothing good in I've got you and the boys, but outside you, I've got nothing good in my life. It's just pain and suffering and struggling, and pain and suffering and struggling. And so he was pretty sneaky, and he went out and bought me a baby Welsh mountain pony, because I used to be a riding instructor. Horses have always been my passion, And he was like, I'm not getting you one to ride because you didn't even get on it. He said, I'll get you a baby and you can go and just fuss it and do all the bits you do before you break them in. And she lived on a farm, which is about a 30-minute walk from home, which on reflection was like so sneaky. It's just hilarious. So I now had like a goal. I wanted to go and see my pony. And I remember as I came off the crutches, I was thinking, how am I going to get to this pony? And the physiotherapist said, you used to mountain bike. And I'm like, yeah, so get on a bike. You're kidding me. If I get on a bike, I'm going to be ill. It's like, stop saying that, get on the bike, go for a ride. And I found, woohoo, I could get to the junction and back. Now I'm talking about a 3-minute ride, like literally whoops, the junction and back. And then over time, I found I could get to the canal and back. But these tiny, weeny distances, I mean, to be honest, the effort of getting my bike down the steps was almost too much for me, let alone getting on it. But these tiny distances grew and grew and grew over a number of months. And, I did make mistakes because I'm stubborn and driven, and I did push myself too hard, and I did pay. I'm telling you, sometimes I paid, and I could pay for a week if I got it wrong. But the tiny distances grew because I was determined to get to see my pony more than my husband was able to drive me there. And it took maybe 2 or 3 months. And I found that I could get my bike down to my pony's field. Now it's almost all downhill, but I'm not going to let that rob me from the victory. But I got to my pony's field, and I was, done in. I'd have to be picked up, and it would have to be put on the bike rack, and I'd have to be driven home. But it was something that I wanted so badly, and motivated me to put the effort in. And I have to be honest, that pony really has been a therapy pony to me all the way along, because she's been a driving force. So that's great. So that's physical fitness. But then what about I worked with text for a job, and I couldn't read. And my physio to sign me off, he was like, wow, this is awesome, can't do any more with you, I'm here if you need me, but I need to sign you off. So I'm like, now what do I do? Like, okay, does this work with reading? This is cognitive, right? I couldn't read and retain any information. If I had an email for like family stuff, my husband would have to read it to me, and then I still struggle to maintain it. But what I did find is I could read and retain 3 words. That was it. So I'd started there, and I'd read 3 words out of a book, and then a couple of minutes later I'd say the words, and then I'd do 4 words, and then I'd do a line at a time, and then half a paragraph. And this was the hardest part of it for me. It was absolutely exhausting. I could sleep for like 2 hours after trying to remember half a paragraph. It was just crazy. But after 4 or 5 months, I found I could do 5 minutes of reading and actually say to somebody else what I'd read, or give them the gist of it. So that was a massive breakthrough. But I tell you, 4 or 5 months to do 5 minutes of reading felt like pulling my legs through treacle. So if I could do 5 minutes reading now, I could work in theory, but could I work? Not really. So I was like, okay, what can I do? Well, I can manage an hour on the phone. Okay, I can just about manage an hour on the phone. So I spoke to my boss, who, fair play, has been absolutely phenomenal through this. And I started back, and I think I started back doing like 3 hours a week with a day off in between. Like, that's where I was at. And it had to all be on the phone or on Zoom, and never more than an hour. And I ended up doing mostly pastoral stuff with a young adults group that I look after, and weirdly found I could do that. Again, I really messed up at times. I tried for too long, too hard, and I paid for it. And I learned from that, but I kept going. And there was something very cathartic about supporting other people who were struggling, and taking my mind off my own struggles to other people's, which, to be honest, were often way smaller, way smaller in my view than what I was struggling with, but they were very big to them. And that's what was critical. It was how it's affecting their life. Then as the reading built up, I started reading emails, but replying by phone, because the typing was a nightmare. So slowly, over 2 years, I've got up to a 26-hour working week, which honestly is mind-blowing, because I'm working, I'm writing, and I'm editing text, and I'm doing live online talks and stuff. So when you think where it's at cognitively, that's impossible. And yet here I am doing 26 hours a week and coping well on 26 hours a week. I'm not doing 26 hours a week and collapsing. I'm doing 26 hours a week and playing at the weekend. So basically, I did that for every area of my life. For me, it worked to stop saying I can't and always try to say, what can I do? It really was a huge thing. Somebody told me about the military saying that there's no such thing as I can't, you just improvise, adapt, and overcome. And it spoke so powerfully to me, because MCAS, I just felt there were so many no's and barriers, and I can't, but to actually say, okay, I can't do that, but I can do that, was really, really powerful. There were a lot of frustrations and a lot of mistakes. And honestly, I remember speaking to the secretary in the office and saying, I'm just not making any improvement. I'm just not going to get my hours up. And her saying to me, don't look over a month, look over 6 months. And then, yeah, there's a gain. But if I looked over a month or 2 months, I couldn't see a gain. And I felt like horrendous. But if I looked over a really long time, I could see a gain. And I learned to celebrate those gains and acknowledge them. Changing to a kind of I can rather than I can't mindset was a massive turning point for me personally. It took me from sleeping on a sofa, sleeping and sitting on a sofa, should I say, that's all I could really do, to ultimately setting the personal challenge of climbing Pen y Fan Mountain, which is South Wales's highest mountain. I'll be honest, I paid for that, but I only paid for 2 days. I don't think it's that bad. So I was made up that I actually got up that mountain. Now, that's great from the physical side, but I was still struggling with horrendous anxiety and fatigue, absolutely horrendous anxiety and fatigue. And these wins might sound really huge, and I guess they are really huge if you're going to celebrate them, but not compared to what my life used to be like. I was a really active, go person, and I, out of desperation, contacted a colleague and friend who'd overcome chronic fatigue. And I knew she'd done this kind of course, and I just thought, I just want to know more. And I ended up enrolling on this online course for ME, just to see if there was anything in there that might help me at all. And I'll be honest, a lot of it was the opposite of useful. In fact, a lot of it could be very damaging, I felt, for the way I travel MCAS. I know MCAS is unique to each of us, but for me, I thought, oof, that's quite damaging. But then it was written for ME and not MCAS. But there were a couple of absolute gems in there. One of them, it sounds so lame, but it was actually simply practicing thankfulness. So, I mean, something as a Christian leader I should be really good at, right? I'm sure I've probably even taught on it or preached on it at some point, but I definitely was not practicing it. But just spending 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day in my mind, just trying to think of things I'm thankful for, even if it was like my husband, my kids, my dog, the food in the fridge. Apparently, it releases happy hormones. I can't comment on that, that's the scientific bit, but it did shift my focus onto just a more positive mindset. But the big thing I learned out of that course was about a scientific link between adrenal fatigue and high histamine. So apparently high histamine causes adrenal fatigue, which causes high histamine, and it's this like replay loop. And he teaches a process where you literally rewire your brain so that your adrenal gland isn't running constantly, poisoning your body and causing inflammation and all the high histamine and all the rest of it. Now, I was hugely skeptical, but all the course was underpinned by research papers. And he shared something about them teaching the army this technique. So when you've got a sniper and they're overcome by fear, they could shut down their fear response, their adrenaline, and focus. He also said to me that he'd give me a refund if it wasn't helpful. So I was like, he's obviously not like a complete crook. So I went for it. I thought, I've got nothing to lose. It partly involved being on top of my thought life, and then using a kind of, so whenever you had kind of anxious, fearful, negative, worst case, what if thoughts, you then use this kind of technique to shut them down. And actually it was fascinating because the adrenaline stopped, my heart rate would go down when I did it. It was absolutely phenomenal, but really difficult with MCAS, right? Because with MCAS we spend our life dodging threats. We spend our life aware that that could get me, that could make me ill for 6 weeks, that could cause anaphylaxis. How do you not live in an anxious thought life when you're battling MCAS? But it has proven to be a really great thing for me, that if I feel that my heart rate's up and I've just, those, I don't know whether you get them, I get like adrenaline surges and I can go and do this thing and it stops them. And it has been a phenomenal tool for me. In fact, it was such an important tool for me. It was that basically put me up the level to climb Pen y Fan Mountain. So all credit to this guy. Might not be for MCAS. In my situation, for me, it was a big help. But as I say, being on top of your thought life is incredibly difficult. If I think about it for myself, I had what we think was probably a really bad gastric anaphylaxis with internal bleeding. I had significant blood loss just 3 months ago. In my view, and actually the doctor's view, I could have died potentially. But what I have to do is not live in fear of that. You know, I need to keep my thought life positive and sensible and calmly risk assess, and what will be. Easier said than done, but that's how I'm trying to walk. So here I am living in a life that is essentially a real shadow of what it was, if I'm honest. For me and the MCAS I have, sensibly avoiding triggers with MCAS means not mixing socially, because I react to perfumes, fabric softeners, you name it, basically allergic to people, not cool for an extrovert. So I live a pretty isolated life. I'm on about 18 ingredients, I think, at the moment, but quite happy with those, if I'm honest. They're things I like, and I work 100% remotely. I do still have flares, but with the meds I'm on, I can keep going. The last time I had time off was when I had the query anaphylaxis, but in the last year I haven't had any other time off work, which is pretty phenomenal. I don't do the job I loved anymore, as my role had to evolve into what I could do. So I don't do out there public speaking or teaching, can't travel. I didn't manage to say goodbye to a lady who was like a mum to me before she died, because I was too ill to travel at that time. This is way back when. I've lost hair, I've lost weight, I've lost youth, I've lost freedom. I have seen more of our local hospital than I'd like, and if I'm honest, as much as I love Dr. Deering to bits, probably know him a bit better than I'd like to know any consultant, really, because we don't want to need them, do we? I don't want you to listen to what I'm saying and think it's been a linear thing of think happy thoughts, because that is just not what it's been. You know, I have had to grieve, and I have grieved hard, and that has been like the deepest ache in my soul. I've had to grieve everything this crummy disease has stolen from me and my family, and perhaps I've grieved harder for what they've lost than what I have. You know, my husband said just last week, I just smashed my foot. So put him through a whole load more trauma, and he said, I don't think you understand how much trauma we're experienced through this. It's not just you. I've sobbed, I've cried, I've tantrumed, I've screamed, I've cried more. As a Christian, I have lost it at God, like literally lost it at God. And in some ways, I'm still grieving. It's like who I used to be and the life I had has died. You know, I can honestly say the grief has been no less than when I've lost good friends or family members, which sounds almost really selfish because they were people, but part of me is gone. But grieving has been absolutely essential. And so has being really real and honest about the struggle. I decided a while back to drop the fine face. If I'm not well, everyone can know it. You know, I don't know about you, I can end up living like a dual life. Like, everything's fine, everything's great. And now if I log into a meeting, everyone's like, how are you, Jess? I say, I'm really struggling, not great today. You know, I'm honest about the struggle. So it's not about just putting on this happy false thing. Grieving's been a process, but it's been a vital process. I mean, it has resulted in me finding a place of accepting where I am for now, and that's been critical. It's been about getting over the guilt of being ill. It's been about, you know, accepting that this is the life I have, but still fighting for more. And I will never stop fighting for more of my life back. I think the key difference is that with my old mindset, I used to wake up and I used to kind of body scan. I don't know whether any of you do that. And you kind of wake up and go, okay, that hurts, this hurts, I feel sick, and I've definitely got diarrhea today. And oh, look, yeah, nice rash. Oh, and I'm flushed, you know, and I'd kind of go through it. And then I'd spend the day worrying about triggers and, you know, and stressing and trying to protect myself. And, you know, and basically ultimately just hoping that tomorrow I'll feel better. So I was wasting every day, or I felt personally I was wasting every day. The difference now, I've gone through the grieving process and come to a place of acceptance, is I refuse to body scan, but I feel how I feel. I sensibly avoid triggers, but I don't obsess over them anymore. And I try and receive each day as a gift, whatever it holds, because actually it is a gift to be here with my husband and my kids and my pets. I think the battle still does rage with MCAS, and there's a lot I can't do. If I focus on the things I can't do, I sink very, very quickly. But by not focusing on the things I can't do and turning it into what can I do and working on that, my quality of life has gone up 1,000-fold, and I'm doing so much more. The meds and fighting back for a positive mindset has seen me go from unable to walk, read, write, work, drive, do anything other than rest and sit around, to climbing mountains, riding horses for up to 3 hours at a time. I can sail a boat, never tried that before, and working 26 hours a week. Essentially, if something feels impossible, as a family, we look at what is possible and build from there. So for me personally, going into other people's homes or any indoor space, I can't really do it if I want to stay well. There's so many triggers there for me because I'm chemically triggered. So a friend crowdfunded, and we bought an old van, and my husband, bless him, converted it into a camper for me. So I can see friends outdoors in their gardens under strict instructions. They're not wearing any perfume or fragrance, but I cook and sleep in my own safe space. Horse riding for me, hugely painful. The MCAS I battle has had like really high pain levels. I was riding in pain. I was like, I'm in pain if I ride, I'm in pain if I don't, so I'm going to ride. But actually then we were like, enough of this. I'm getting off walking like a pregnant duck because everything kind of hurt. I'm like, no, we need to do something about this. And we did loads of research and found a special saddle, and I'm not really in pain now when I ride. We've improvised and adapted and somehow managed to overcome. So for every seeming blockade, there's usually something I found in my situation I can do, even if it's a massive compromise, and some of them are huge. And then the key for me has been receiving that with a thankful heart and refusing to focus on what I can't do. You know, sitting and having a meal with my family is great, even if I can't eat what they're eating. It's become kind of a daily choice, and I don't always get it right, and I do have days I sink, but it's working. And over the last 3 years, it's seen me make advancement I would never have made if I hadn't had that mindset personally. I get that what I've shared here is hugely challenging. It's hugely challenging to me. It's hugely challenging. And I just want to say again, this is my story. And along with my faith and friends and people who love me, it's what's worked for me. I'm not suggesting it should be your story or it would work for you. But as I really said at the beginning, I really hope that by sharing some of this with you, you're able to take away something, even if it's just that you're sat and you're in a really bad place, just say to you, it does get better. You know, if you're on the worst day, you know, it does get better. There are better days to come, and to hold on to that hope. Even if that's all you've got, just hold the hope that there will be better days, because better days do come. You know, where I was at, I honestly thought I was dying and I had nothing to live for apart from my husband and kids. And without them, would I still be here? Probably just. But it has got better for me, and I believe it can get better for all of us. But it's a journey. It really is a journey, and you have to just kind of, it's a trudge sometimes. I know I've been warned you guys are going to ask me what meds I'm on, so I have brought a list so we can do that now just before I finish. But the main thing I just want to say that for me, it's been trigger avoidance. Okay, I haven't found a way around the trigger avoidance. I read Dr. Afrin's book, and he was very clear on the importance of it. So wanting my life back, I've gone for it, and that has meant for me avoiding other people in indoor spaces. We've changed all of our cleaning fluids to vinegar. We have no chemicals in our home. I don't drink tapped water. That was a trigger for me, strangely. I avoid all trigger and high histamine foods, and I don't play with that anymore. I'm just settled with what I've got, and I'm happy I can eat. I can't walk outside when there's smoke. Even the bedding my horses sleep on is trigger free, you know, because I was reacting to their bedding. And it's really interesting when I think about it, this is where the grievings come in for me. It's not so much the ill health, but the things that I'm excluded from doing. But anyway, just so I bet you're itching to know. So the meds that I am currently on, I'm on 480 fexofenadines in a day. I'm on 240 milligrams of famotidine. I take 5 milligrams of ivabradine for the POTS, which has been just a miracle drug for me personally. 4 milligrams of ketotifen at night because I just feel stoned when I take it. Then sodium chromoglycate, I take 20 milligram nebulizers up to 3 times a day, and 300 milligrams orally 3 times a day. That's been a rough ride. Okay, my body and my mind did not like sodium chromoglycate. It really messed with me with anxiety and low mood, and it didn't make me feel great. But for me personally, it was worth riding it out, because it took me from just passing yellow water to actually being able to eat what I can eat, and I'm so thankful for that. And I recently found out just how much it's doing for me when it didn't do what it should do. Then herbally, quercetin, you all know about that, but a good one that I found for me personally for pain was something called Boswellia serrata. That took my pain from a 7 to a 3. It's been an absolute wonder drug for me. Not the stuff that you burn. People say, oh, do you burn it? No, you take it orally. Nettle, which I've just stopped taking because it did work and then not so much. Vitamin D, I can't tolerate vitamin C anymore. I used to, and it now makes me poorly. Then, because of the latest medications that I'm on, which I'll tell you about in a moment, I also take 2 probiotics that are said to be MCAS friendly. I'm not saying they're MCAS friendly because mast cells are weird little critters and they do strange things to each of us, but I have found I can manage Saccharomyces boulardii, I'm reading this now, Saccharomyces boulardii and Lactobacillus ramosus And the reason I'm on those is 3 weeks ago, I started a trial of doxycycline for mast cell stabilization. So I'm on this doxycycline, which is an antibiotic. I'm on 100 milligrams twice a day. The reason I requested it off Dr. Deering is I was put on it last year when I was bitten by a tick because they were worried about Lyme's again because of what happened. And I found on the course of doxycycline, I wasn't ill at all. I didn't have any MCAS symptoms. It was insane. I remember crying when I stopped taking them because I was like, I'm going to be ill again, and then collapsed the next day. I did some research, found that there's a lady in America who it's for her, it's worked, and she actually is 3 years into remission on doxycycline. I contacted her and she was very guarded and said, listen, this doesn't work for everybody. It works for a very tiny subset of patients. It's not to be taken lightly. It's kind of a last resort because there is a downside to doxycycline. But yeah, I then went to, bless him, Dr. Deering, and said, do you think we could try doxycycline? And he was like, yeah, let's give it a blast. Currently for me, I'm on the end of week 3 and I've had no symptoms. So I'm really hopeful that for me, after over 2 years of trying this and trying that and trying this and trying that, and yes, gaining massive headway, I can climb a mountain and ride for 3 hours, but not always feeling great. I'm really hoping and praying this might be the silver bullet that really gives me the ground. But it is too early to say it's only 3 weeks, but I'm like, it's still 3 weeks. And I've, it's just crazy. So anyway, that's everything I had to say. I hope some of it has blessed you somehow in some way. Take what's useful, throw away what isn't. Yeah, and I just really want to wish you guys the very best in your healing journeys as you are traveling this MCAS. And thank you as a group and the admin guys here for all that you're doing, because honestly, you are such a lifeline to all of us in setting up the Facebook groups and setting up evenings like this. Thanks.
Thanks, Jess. I don't really know what to say. That was so much. I couldn't have imagined how good that was going to be. I'm sure everybody feels the same. And yeah, unbelievable. I mean, it's a tale of just persistence and positivity. And yeah, to be honest, I'm getting a bit emotional thinking about it. But thank you so much for giving it your time, and so amazing. And we're going to have 45 minutes now for questions. And if people do want to put hands up and ask questions to you, that's fine. We can do that and we'll get around. But I'm going to just read out some of the questions from the chat now, and then after I've done that, I'll turn the recording off so people aren't on Zoom, and then they can ask questions. So the first one for you, Jess, was it the Gupta program you were talking about? No.
I decided against the Gupta program because I work for a charity and I was upset at the fees. I'll be honest, it's just a moral thing for me. I actually went to a guy called Amir who runs, I think it's the Energy Excellence Process. I might have to look it up. And when I contacted him and said, I'm an MCAS patient wondering if this will work, he said, I have a guarantee that you can do this. And if it doesn't work, I'll give you a full refund. And it was not a lot of money. And it for me, it was life-changing. But I just want to say some of it is for ME patients, and some of it about not thinking something's going to harm you is not necessarily helpful. Like I have had major reactions to blueberries and things like that. To look at that blueberry and go, that's not going to hurt me, and then eat it is going to be not great, right? So I needed to go through it, and I said this to Dr. Deering when I was talking about it. I said patients have to sift through it very carefully and take what is relevant to MCAS, remembering this is for ME. But the actual tool they teach you to shut down the adrenaline is absolutely phenomenal. So if you did it and just took that, that's for me been the big massive leap forward on that one.
Oh, sorry, I just realized. Okay, that's amazing. Thank you for that. I've just written that down myself, to be honest. Have you tried LDN, or has that been talked about with Dr. Deering?
So that was our next line. So we've discussed it before. I'm personally a bit cautious of it for personal reasons, which Dr. Deering, bless him, was like, you don't need to be cautious of it for those reasons, but I just am. And that was what he'd come up with in the next appointment. In fact, the plan was for me, if the doxycycline didn't work, to just get me a bit more ground, it was like up the ketotifen and have it in the morning. And I was like, no, Dr. Deering, I'll be asleep at my desk. And then LDN. So that's actually our 3-point plan going forward. But the doxycycline has done such a good job, I don't think I'm going to need it. But I was like, right, if the doxycycline doesn't work, up the ketotifen. If that completely stones me out, then I'll try the LDN. But for me, it was a last resort. I think more because I've been warned as well, that it can make you feel really grotty before you get better. And I was just like, no, I've gained so much ground, I don't want to even lose that, you know. So
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you very much. And a quick one. I think somebody said, what was the pain medication you were talking about?
Okay, not a pain medication. It's over the counter, and it is herbal. Boswellia serrata. Boswellia serrata. I discovered this because it worked on my horse. So I medicated my horse with it, and she went sound, and I was like, can people take this? And so myself and somebody else at the farm where I used to keep my horses, actually, she's moved now, took it, and she got better on it. And then I was like, I'm going to give it a blast. And it literally, I came off it and went back on it, and my pain went from a 7 to a 3. It was extraordinary within about 48 hours. It doesn't work for everyone. I've suggested to other people and it hasn't worked. Some people it has, some people it hasn't. But for me, it's been an absolute godsend. So Boswellia serrata, and you want the capsules. Just be really careful, get decent ones, because some of them have really rubbishy fillers, and you can get 100% pure is really what you want.
Great, thank you. I'm going to keep going because we've got a few. So somebody, it's actually a note for you, said, have you read about remission biome? I think it's people talking about antibiotics and how they work. Remission biome, that is. So good note for everybody there. Thanks, Michael. And what was the POTS medication you were talking about?
So ivabradine. So often they put you on beta blockers, but that is not always brilliant with MCAS, apparently. So ivabradine worked for me. But again, POTS is very similar to MCAS. What works for one person doesn't work for another. And you have to trial stuff and try stuff and tweak stuff. I was really lucky that one medication worked really quickly and basically zeroed out the POTS. So I don't really have any POTS symptoms if I'm on that, which is awesome, because I did used to kind of keel over if I stood and spoke to anyone for too long. So glad that's over.
Exactly. Well, clearly it was amazing. But we've just got another quick note from Helen, who I always bang on about this Instagram account. I think I said it to you before. Jess, Hells, Bells and Marcel's is super positive. And you've spoken to her yourself, haven't you?
I messaged her. So I saw that she was in remission, and I messaged her and I went, hey, I want remission. What did you have? And she was very, bless her, rightly guarded in her response. But she said, for me, it was doxycycline. But, you know, it only works for some patients. It has to be a last resort. I had all the caveats in. I was kind of at the same place she was at, though, in that I got as far as I could with everything else. So, yeah. And the dosaging, Dr. Deering and I are just working out. I've started on the dose that worked when I had it for prophylactic Lymes, and we're now just tapering it down. And the aim is to get on the lowest dose, hopefully like almost pre-microbial kind of dose, to maintain the symptoms without trashing my gut biome and everything else. So.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. Yeah, and I think you've already clarified that, but yeah, obviously meds is you said it throughout your whole thing, but yeah, meds is obviously different for everybody. So hopefully people will remember that as well. I'm sure they will. A quick one for you. Could you repeat the second probiotic? Was it Lactobacillus rhamnosus?
Ramosis, yeah. Okay. I can actually grab the pot and just double check. Literally over here. Yes, Lactobacillus rhamnosus. And the other one's Sacrodus boulardii. It's the Optivac one. Tina Pearce, I think I found out about this one from Tina Pearce. She recommended it in some talk she did that I went listen to online.
Okay, amazing. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just looking through because there's some nice messages from you as well. Did you find that any of the MCAS targeting drugs touched the POTS?
Yes. So this was really interesting, and I was left with the question of, do I have POTS, or is this kind of autonomic dysfunction-y stuff actually a symptom of POTS? And I don't think I have the answer. Dr. Afrin does some quite interesting stuff on that if you want to look it up. The POTS was worse when I was in flare, like a lot worse. So actually what Dr. Deering did with me is he left the POTS till the end, because he tried to squash the MCAS, and the POTS was getting better, but because it still remained and it was fairly debilitating, then we chucked the ivabradine in to squash the POTS. But there was definitely, for me, a total correlation between how much mast cell activity was going on and how bad the POTS was. Okay, that's so. I suppose so. Sorry, just quickly there. So it was kind of MCAS first, and then the POTS. So I had both. So I went in. I had a diagnosis. I had MCAS and POTS, but was the pot so bad because the MCAS was bad?
Right, okay.
Because the aim is always, isn't it, to have the least medication. So Dr. Deering, it really frustrated me, to be honest, you know, as a human, because the POTS was really debilitating, but he was like, let's just try and get the MCAS under control and then see how much POTS is left, was his kind of way of dealing with it.
Okay, yeah.
But in the end, it was like, I was like, Dr. Deering, he was like, yeah, okay, try some of Aberdeen. And it was like, yay, I can stand up right now.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, that's I'm really pleased for you that you're seeing Dr. Deering, because he gets such good reviews.
Oh, he's amazing. He was amazing.
A quick one: which brand of Boswellia do you use?
Oh, okay. It's a good job I'm in the kitchen. Isn't it?
Sorry, I just read the one below it, and quercetin as well.
So quercetin I've recently changed. This has got fillers in it though. So one of the problems I had is there's a company called Pure. If you're allergic to ginger and pepper like I am, it's not so pure. It's kind of an MCAS attack in a tablet. So I've actually ended up on not a very expensive one. It's a Bodygenics, but I wouldn't recommend it because it does have fillers in it. And I'm not recommending any of these brands either, because what works for me probably won't work for you. So, you know, I've gone through a few. I reacted to the last one. This one I don't. I can't work out why, because it's actually, I think, got 2 more fillers in it than the other one. They're different fillers. The Boswellia serrata though is this one. Okay, I don't know whether you can see.
Cool.
It's easy for me to show you. Okay. The key thing that I learned when I was reading around it is the amount of boswellic acid in there. You can get quite cheap ones. I was tempted to try my horse's one, to be honest, because it's cheaper, but I couldn't dose it right. But this one's 65% boswellic acid, and it what I found is in the day one, my pain went from a 7-8 to like a 5-6, and then day 2 it was a like 4-5, and then day 3 it was down to a 3. And it's, I mean, I haven't got any pain at the moment at all, but that was when I came off it, because when I had the gastric anaphylaxis thing, I came off everything because everything reset on me. It was, I know when I had that, you have like a massive flare, like a big bang scary one, and then everything suddenly like, oh, what am I reacting to now? I came off everything and I was in agony, and I had to get that back in very, very quickly because I realised that's the bit that was missing. It is actually a natural mast cell stabiliser, so it's awesome. I love that stuff, but it works for me. It has worked for others. It doesn't work for everyone.
That's great. I'm sure people, I've never heard of that myself, so I'm really excited to hear about that. And a couple of people saying, have you done any like gut testing things?
No.
Okay, cool. And have you found anything to help with chemical sensitivities other than avoidance?
Nebulizing sodium chromoglycate.
Okay.
So I mean, I smashed my foot on Tuesday. Okay, I'm on the doc's cycling, so you know it's like it's a bit messy. Is it this? Is it that? But I went into 2 hospital waiting rooms, 2 trauma waiting rooms. So I got referred to the major hospital. I was in hospitals with cleaning fluids. I came out without a flare. But what's really helped with that is nebulizing sodium chromoglycate. But I'm having to do 3 nebulizers a day to keep a lid on it. So it's quite hard work. And actually what I did in the end was my hubster got me a little portable nebulizer, because it just meant I couldn't go anywhere, like, because I've got to go home and nebulize. You know? So I've got a portable nebulizer, so if I'm down the farm I can just hook onto that and do it. That's the thing. And I notice that as long as I do those, I'm better. But really for me it's been trigger avoidance. Like, you know, I can't just go to a party where everyone's got tons of perfume on. You know, history would dictate to me that I am likely to be very ill if I do that. So that's why for me it's been about trigger avoidance, to stop annoying my mast cells in the first place. The trigger avoidance has been probably one of the biggest things that I've had to do to get wellness, to get to climbing mountains, riding horses, working more hours, because I was just triggering myself the whole time, because I'm stubborn, right? You probably picked up on that. just keep triggering myself. Doesn't matter what the doctors were giving me, I was kept on triggering myself. Some of it has got to be our part, not just the meds, for me anyway.
That's great. Yeah, stubborn or brave, either word, or maybe a mixture of the two. And another question for you: how do you know the difference? This is a kind of tricky one. How do you know the difference between your long COVID and MCAS? But I think you did you say earlier that I don't
think I ever had long COVID. I think that yes, I had symptoms of long COVID. Mine was never like other people's. So when I actually helped moderate a long COVID group for a while, and I found that other people were getting better and then collapsing, and I was like, I never got well. Like, I just collapsed and never got up. I don't believe personally that I do believe in that there is long COVID, but I don't believe I ever had long COVID. I think that the COVID aggravated my mast cells to the point that they just went bang, and then that was it. But that's for me. I know other people that have got long COVID and MCAS stuff hasn't worked for them. So it's, you know, that's something else, isn't it?
Yeah. No, that's fascinating, because that is always what I say as well. It's so difficult. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you for that. And sorry, I'm just reading the next question. Do you ever get the blood pooling in your feet, like purple feet?
Not in my feet. I've had like numb feet. I've had pins and needles in my legs. Have I ever had purple feet? No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So mine, if this is a POTS thing, it was like basically I just fell over a lot. I'd stand up and fall over. I get off the loo and fall over. I'd stand and talk to my neighbour over the fence and go, woo! So yeah, rather than, I know some POTSy people have it, like their legs get really heavy or something, but no.
Okay. That's fine. When you were talking about the brand that you're using, Pure, was that Pure encapsulations?
No, Pure encapsulations are absolutely brilliant. They're just really expensive and I can't always afford them. It's another one that's they're advertising on Facebook a lot, and they say Pure Boswellia, Pure quercetin, and I ordered a load, and then it's full of ginger and black pepper, which I'm allergic to both, like full on allergic to both. So I have to go and say, how dare you say you're pure? You might be natural, but you're not pure. So it's you'll see them on Facebook a lot. If they work out you've got MCAS, they'll bomb your newsfeed, I found.
Okay, well, that's good. I mean, the next few questions really again about brands. Does Dr. Doering recommend any specific brands or?
So he has occasionally said to me, try this or that, but it is, and he always says to me when I say I found one that works, he's like, what one was it? But the problem is, it's crazy. Like the brand that works for one person won't work for another. It's really as simple as that. And I don't know whether sometimes it's in the manufacturing process or cross-contamination or whatever. I don't know that somebody else's brand is necessarily helpful.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. We'll leave those, because I think it's probably, you're probably doing some good sifting of questions actually, because that's probably not the best idea. A bit of a long one here. How did you keep going through the mind-numbing slowness of any progression with exercise?
I just keep going.
Yeah.
You just keep going. It is mind-numbing. And the key thing that I learned is pushing too hard sends you back. So you just celebrate any gain, you know, and for me, it was literally 3 steps, 3 steps, 3 steps, 4 steps, 4 steps, 4 steps, 4 steps. And the other thing that's really important I found with the exercise gain is looking back a long way. Don't look back over a week or a month, look back over 3 months or 4 months, and then you see the gain. But it's just willpower. I think you just keep going, and also know when to rest. Like know when it's not a pushing day is really important, which I found very hard, and I still find very hard to work out the days that's a day of rest. And I just decided I will have a day of rest once a week. I do nothing, like nothing. 6 days a week I push and go. Okay,
I think that's a great tip, or anything. Sorry, my brain fog now. It's a great piece of advice, I think, or not advice, whatever it is. What was the natural mast cell stabilizer you were talking, the name of it you were talking, not the brand, sorry, just the actual.
Are we back on Boswellia serrata?
Is that what it was? Okay,
I think that's Boswellia serrata, because quercetin's a natural mast cell stabilizer as well, but Boswellia serrata as well.
Okay, cool. And somebody else has asked about fluid retention, but I think we just talked about that.
Oh no, so yeah, so like oedema, fluid retention, just swelling up.
Yeah.
Yes, big time. Big time. And if I'm in flare, well, I know when I'm coming out of flare, it might be too much information, but I'll be on the loo every hour passing liters, because it just suddenly just comes off me. But yeah, big time. And in fact, it was when I had the I had this gastric anaphylaxis. They never did trip days, so we can't say for sure, but basically gastric anaphylaxis. I was huge. I was like the Michelin. I mean, my fingers were swollen and white. I was swollen. And then 2 weeks later, when I changed the sodium chromoglycate batch and came back down, I was just peeing for it. It was just ridiculous. It was just all the fluid leaving me. So it's one of my big symptoms actually when I'm in flare, that I just bloat out. Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's good for that person. Sorry, my brain is just completely left. The next question, which I think you talked about before, you are on a low histamine diet. Yeah, 100%. I'm no longer religiously taking DAO though. So I did for a long time take DAO. And actually I'm like, I've got it there, but I just eat low histamine. Like if you eat for me, I was just like, it's costing 30 something pounds, another 30 something, you know what it's like, you buy all these tablets, it costs a fortune. So it's there for I guess if I eat something I'm like, I'm not 100% sure, and I'll drop a couple down, but I'm not taking it all the time. I just opted to eat low histamine because I feel better when I eat low histamine. Chocolate sometimes gets me though, to be fair. It does sometimes, and I'm eating it. My husband's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Just one square won't hurt." And then in the morning, I'm like, "Why did I have the chocolate?" So yeah, low histamine's been a big thing for me.
Okay, cool. So DAO and chocolate that's what you're going for. Do you react to the sun at all?
Right, not to the sun, but to the cold horrendously, absolutely horrendously, which is a big problem for me because I have got horses and I'm up at, like, in the winter, I'm up at 5:30 in minus goodness knows what, trying to do horses on the side of a Welsh mountain hill. It's a real problem. But I haven't so much the sun. Having said that, I'm not a big sun worshipper. So I don't kind of sit and sunbathe, but I celebrate when summer comes because I always feel better.
Okay, that's really good to know. That's so funny because the opposite of me.
Really?
Yeah. Have you, and then sorry, I'm just seeing. I think the last question we'll do on the chat, and then I'll stop recording and we can open up to some in-person questions. But the last one that I can see is, have you ever looked into the Perrin technique?
No.
No. Okay, cool. I would imagine, I don't know who that is, but I would imagine it's quite similar to the one that you did. Cool. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.